I had an interesting exchange with a viewer recently who thought I'd stretch my Dragon Swamp review a bit far by proposing that Dragon Swamp, Broken Blade, and Crouching Tiger were all connected. That stretch was of course the point of that video. They're connected for me regardless of facts. But sometimes our intuition is right. Watching 1967's The Silent Swordsman, I felt this weird hunch that it was based on a Jin Yang novel. Later on I read The Book and the Sword, and lo and behold it was an adaptation of that novel, with the ending changed for cinematic effect. But sometimes it goes completely in the opposite direction. Case in point, Swordsman at Large from 1971 and Swordsman and Enchantress from 1979. They couldn't be more different in content or tone, and you'd never make a connection between the two. But they're both actually based on the same novel, 11th Son by Gu Long. The only similarities are the characters' roles. Even the love triangles built on four central characters pivot from one film's two women and a man to two men and a woman. More on that as we go deeper. 1971's Swordsman at Large is a free-ranging wuxia film that, as I mentioned in my Angel with the Iron Fist review a couple years back, mostly sails on the wings of the delectable Tina Ting Fei. Xiaoxi Lang, the 11th Son, is the hero of both films, a jovial roving knight who, though highly skilled, avoids violence when possible. Here, copycat bandits are taking advantage of his temporary absence to commit crimes claiming to be him.
消失一郎，十一郎，
消失一郎，
消失一郎的消失一郎。
sullying his name. Thankfully, Xiaoxi Lang has a couple of friends, the swordswoman Feng Xunyang and a barman named Fu, who try to keep his name clear. But everything falls apart when Xiao falls for a conservative heiress reputed to be the most beautiful woman in the world. The woman, here named Xin Yonghui, has just seen her whole estate slaughtered and goes on the run with Xiaoxi Lang. Thrust into isolation together, they manage to avoid any impropriety, although their longing at one point makes them burst into song. I mean, they've been drinking, I guess. The movie goes heavy on interpersonal connections, particularly Xiao's relationships with these two women. Feng clearly has the hots for Xiao.
就可惜，还是嫁不出去。
这是哪儿的话？江湖中人谁不知你长得漂亮？不过，除了我萧十一郎啊，还真没人敢娶你。
你要是这么说，如果我真的嫁不掉，小心我要赖上你哦。
But her efforts to help him go far beyond any carnal desires. They have a real bond, which is frustrating for a modern Western viewer because we can't figure out why he'd pass her over for the very cool but vanilla Xin Yonghui. In the end, they both acquit themselves admirably in a fun action sequence, but Xiao sticks with Xing. Feng warns them that she'll be back in a year, and implies that she might try one more time to replace Xing in Xiao's life. The MacGuffin in both these films is the fabled deer sword. It's displayed with an earthy realism here, something that pervades this movie. Outdoor settings are used for almost every single scene, somewhat unusual for a Shaw Brothers production. It opens the movie up and really reinforces this Wild West feeling. Swordsman at Large does build on Kung Fu cinema's debt to the Western. The lone hero in an arid, rocky landscape, pursued by rascals because he's quick on the draw. Of course, those arid landscapes are partly thanks to the limited shooting choices in the new territories, but the Shaw Brothers never shied away from the music, costuming, and heroes who evoked what was being done in Italy and America at the time, while still staying true to Hong Kong's spirit. The movie Xiaoxi Lang, perhaps unlike the novel version, would sit perfectly well alongside Shane, Silenzio, Trinity, or The Man with No Name. Both genres with roots in pulp novels give a visual realization of a mythical past, turning legend into history. Both evolved into lucrative cinema, B-movies and blockbusters, and unquestioned classics. For the most part, you could show this movie to kids, except it does begin with this salaciously filmed attempted rape. Feng Xulang stops the rape, but she can't stop this otherwise G-rated adventure getting an R-rated opening. As an aside, one of the criminals in that scene is actually martial arts legend Sammo Hung in a blink and you'll miss him role. 1979's Swordsman and Enchantress is a Chor Yuen film based on a Gu Long novel. That means wacky twists in the plot, and the twists here could not be wackier. Superstars Ti Lung and Ching Li star as the knight-errant Xiao and his ladylove Shen, Xing Yonghui in the previous film. Most of the names have been tweaked from the earlier versions, so I'm mostly going to stick with the actors' names here, since all of the actors are pretty well known if you enjoy classic martial arts films. Shaw star Lily Li plays the Tina Ting Fei character in various states of PG-rated undress, but she's oddly underused. Both her lack of clothing and her lack of screen time are unusual for Lily Li, but the ability to underuse serious talent was one of the advantages of the old studio system. 70s kung fu enthusiasts will be shocked at the number of cameos by major actors that flash by. Kara Hui, Yuan Biao, Wan Qingqing, you name it. Lily Li's sidelining shifts us far more into macho 80s territory, with a central love triangle being between Xiao, the greatest beauty of the martial world Qing Li, and her husband Lian. The earlier movie had softened the tension between Xiao and Xing by replacing Xing's husband in the book with an egotistical cousin, no marriage. Swordsman and Enchantress goes for the forbidden nature of their love with gusto. The tension is now largely between Xiao and Lian, two men in love with the same woman and worried about the etiquette of killing somebody who may or may not have insulted them. To liven things up, there are kung fu zombies, a kinky midnight human sacrifice ritual, which never comes to fruition, and a romantic cottage on a mysterious river that can only be accessed by throwing yourself off a bridge. The villain is a pernicious teenage girl who slaughters her own staff when they don't meet her expectations. She kills them with leaves, no less. She simply will never go away, even when Ti Lung and Ching Li have fled to their unreachable island retreat. When chased from the remote bungalow, they flee into a sort of haunted house, and this is where things get really weird. The entry hall features a model villa full of tiny versions of important kung fu fighters, which they're told comes to life once a month, a sort of mini Brigadoon. The pair get drugged, and they awake to find themselves inside the model villa, where teacups and chopsticks are gigantic, and the miniaturized kung fu masters waste their days in idleness. Being a Gulong adaptation, of course, there are several twists to come, even this late in the film. I'm going to leave those to you to experience firsthand. The first film features a fairly standard spaghetti western style soundtrack with a Chinese twist. Bits of it sound like they were riffing on Miles Davis's Sketches of Spain. The second soundtrack dives into the excesses of 1970s kitsch. Along the lines of Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head from Butch and Sundance, or the jarring theme music to True Grit. You'll find this. To anyone who's listened to my rapturous praise for the Django Unchained soundtrack, that probably sounds disingenuous.
There ain't no grave can hold my body down.
But I feel like Django's jarring soundtrack is meant to evoke levels of film history.
Willie, take us home.
Whereas these 1970s examples just kind of look like somebody's trying to look hip with the times.
I'm never gonna stop the rain by complaining because I'm free.
The directors wisely chose to split up the source material into manageable bites. If the puppet village had shown up in the old-fashioned Swordsman at large, it would have been laughable. Swordsman and Enchantress is just weird enough that you can go with a sudden miniaturization of the main characters. There's a judicious use of Gulong's novel in each movie. In contrast, I know the Brave Archer movies have their fans, but I find them a little overstuffed and overly ambitious, moving 1,000 miles per hour to cram in Jen Yong's massive novel, The Condor Heroes. And then it only covers about the first half of the book over 3 films. The novel 11th Son, which is considerably shorter, does exist in English in a great translation, and if you're a reader, I recommend checking it out. When I did a recent rewatch of these two films, my wife, always my wisest critic, asked, why these? When there are so many Shaw Brothers movies you love, why this one? Part of it is admittedly that I'm smitten with the relationship between Xiao and Feng, who I'm evidently shipping. But just as much, I'm interested in how two director-writer teams take the same material and make something completely different out of it. See my earlier videos on the Philadelphia Story or Rio Bravo. Swordsman and Enchantress takes Gulong's passion for eccentric characters, backstabbing, and extreme kung fu powers, and he turns them into a technicolor fantasy. There are better kung fu and wuxia films. There are more athletic ones. But story-wise, these two take the cake.